Luciana Berger. Normally when we talk about politicians' life and times, when we talk to them, they're normally a lot older than you. You're just 42. You were elected as a Labour MP in 2010. You served until the last general election. In February 2019, you left the Labour Party.
I did.
Just remind us why.
It wasn't ever a decision I anticipated having to even contemplate, yet, let alone make that decision. But I left the Labour Party because it no longer represented the values that had led me to join it in the first place. So when I was a wide-eyed, aspirational student, very idealistic, what drew me to the Labour Party, it was what was very much an integral part of the membership card. It was values around equality for all and anti-racism against all. And I spent a disproportionate amount of my time towards the end of my period in Parliament tackling with issues around anti-Jewish racism within the Labour Party under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. For me, that took its toll. It became too much. I was the parliamentary chair of the Jewish Labour movement at the time, and I just didn't feel comfortable remaining within the party at that moment.
You're now back.
I am.
Came back in February of this year.
Yes.
Why?
There was a really significant moment that happened early this year. So in the wake of the last leadership in that period, under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, in the weeks and months that followed, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission announced that they were investigating the Labour Party, and there was a pretty damaging findings. It was the Labour Party under that leadership was found to have intimidated and harassed its Jewish members. There was political interference that had come from the top, and the Labour Party was put into special measures. This is normally a mechanism reserved for, organisations that do really bad things. So it was, pretty traumatic, I think, to the party to have been put in that place. People said, that I must have had some sort of satisfaction that those findings were brought forward, but no, not at all. Early this year, after a number of special measures and requirements that the Labour Party had to carry out, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission took the party out of special measures. It was determined that under the leadership of Sir Keir Starmer that many things had been done to turn the party around, to root out that racism, to show leadership and to really tackle some of those challenges within. And so for me, that was a really important moment. I'd left the Labour Party because I couldn't sleep at night, and in the wake of the party coming out of special measures, I felt the party was returning to a place that I could call home again.
6 people have been convicted for anti-Semitic abuse against you since 2013. 4 of those have been to prison. It's hard to actually read out those numbers, but you went through that. Did you ever fear for your life?
There were some pretty dark moments. When you say it like that, it sounds pretty stark, and people might have seen 1 or 2 of the stories. Some, there was a lot of press coverage, others were more concealed. There were moments when I was subject to thousands of racist and abusive messages that were prompted as a result of people being convicted and sent to prison. So it wasn't just those individuals that were held to account, it's the actions that followed by others as well. We live in a country where we can hold people to account. So I took some comfort from the fact that when people threatened my life and or directed that racist abuse towards me, that they could be held to account. And I would always and would continue to use the full force of the law to try and hold those people to account where they can be identified. But yes, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some times where it's pretty tricky. I chose to go into public life. My experience is pretty unique. It's not. I think it's important for people to know that it's a matter of a number of different circumstances, which meant that I got more than my fair share, shall we say. But certainly. What gave me some comfort and strength was the fact that people were convicted as a result of it. And some people, as you say, 4 of them served prison sentences.
There were times during your period as a Labour MP, because of the abuse that you were subjected to, that the police recommended that you needed security. It was a very dark moment when I saw you at Labour Party conference when I was a Labour MP and you were there with police security. I think everybody would feel ashamed that was necessary. So you have the security when you're an MP. The day after the election, which you weren't re-elected, or you weren't elected, there is no security anymore. What's it like to have security and then the day after it's gone?
Well, I know it's certainly something that Parliament is looking at. There was an inquiry that was conducted quite recently in Parliament. Sir Charles Walker was the chair of, and I think there's been a number of recommendations for people leaving Parliament to ensure that if they need security to continue, that is made available. That because you're no longer elected doesn't necessarily mean the threat doesn't remain. And so I think a lot of lessons have been learned in the wake of my experience, and it wasn't just affecting me; it affected others as well. But it's unusual where people, you're told that you face a threat, and then we don't assess the threat because you're no longer an MP. Well, yeah, but does the threat no longer remain? And if people can't answer that question, then I think it's problematic for anyone that finds himself in public office and then is no longer elected.
So and we've talked to Charles Walker about this in a previous programme actually, but basically you're saying if there is an objective threat where some MPs who are no longer MPs are subject to, then the police should do an assessment.
Absolutely. I think that just because you're no longer have the MP after your name, you're still very much in the public eye. And I hope that there wasn't a threat, but the fact that they even evaluated, or that they certainly didn't, in the wake of the 2019 election was challenging for myself and others as well.
You sat in the shadow cabinet for a time. You were shadow mental health minister, position in the shadow cabinet. Did your own mental health suffer by what you endured during your years as a member of Parliament?
Certain moments, yes, absolutely. And I'd be lying if I said that it didn't. 2018 was probably the toughest year. Trying to tackle those issues of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish racism within the Labour Party took up so much energy and time. And I was pregnant as well. And it was personally very, very distressing. So that was in particular a tricky year. I count myself really fortunate, really, really fortunate that I happen to have a high level of resilience. I certainly don't take that resilience for granted. I'm very conscious of the fragility of all of our mental health. And at any moment that resilience can be chipped away, and sometimes it's just the last straw that can break the camel's back. So I count myself really lucky that I've come out the other side, and maybe a future moment it will have an impact. But I was very fortunate to have a fantastic team around me, great family and friends, and I appreciate for many people they don't have that. And certainly when I was involved in some court cases where other people had been victims as well, and I'd heard their victim impact statements, I was very struck by the impact that the racism and abuse had on other people and the toll that it had taken to, which meant that they weren't able to continue in their daily working lives, or they weren't able to maintain relationships with their family and friends. So I've certainly never taken it for granted. And
there was a phrase you used earlier in the interview where you said you couldn't sleep at night and stay in the Labour Party. Was that a figure of speech, or you actually couldn't?
I literally couldn't sleep. I felt sick. I had like a permanent pain in my chest,
really,
tightness, and
sort of physical manifestations of the stress that you were under.
Indeed, and I was pregnant at the time in that last year, and I was also aware, having had the proactive conversation with some health professionals about the impact of stress on pregnancy, and I knew that I had to make that decision to leave because I couldn't allow that to impact on my unborn child.
You have a full-time job now, and you also, in addition to that, you're chair of the Maternal Mental Health Alliance. Your patron is the Princess of Wales. Must be pretty fascinating to have her as your patron. What are you both trying to achieve? What's the organisation trying to achieve?
The Maternal Mental Health Alliance is an extraordinary and fantastic organisation that is such a privilege for me to be the chair of. It's the body that brings together any organisation that provides services, support, care, charity, campaigning to both expectant and new mums. mental health affects us all, but particularly in the period of pregnancy and the year after birth as women. And there are some conditions that we are, they are more likely to experience during that period. Also as women, it's the time in our lives where we are 30 to 40 times more likely to experience a period of psychosis. That doesn't discriminate, it can affect everyone. The Alliance is really important to share best practice about how best to provide those services across the UK. The Alliance has campaigned to open mother and baby units across all four corners of the United Kingdom to ensure that babies are kept together with their mums during that time if mums need inpatient mental health support. And we go from strength to strength as an alliance to not only do great stuff here, but also to showcase it to the world, where it's been the example to other places to set up their own alliances as well, to both campaign and to share best practice.
So you have a very full-on life. You're now a single parent too. How is that? Lots of people are single parents.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think we all just contend with the challenges that we face, and there's many people that are full-time single working parents and doing their best. My kids are pretty small. My youngest is going to be starting primary school, but it's always that challenge of when you're at work, you're expected to be a parent. When you're a parent, you're expected not to be working, and just trying to make that all work, but doing my best.
Final question, happy question. You're doing a bit of stand-up comedy.
I am.
So my name's Luciana Berger, and I'm a recovering politician. Yeah.
Can I take you back to when I first met you? We were new MPs, and I remember distinctly, we were on the House of Commons terrace. I think we were having a first drink together. And you said to me, I'm not funny. I don't know where this came from, but I remember you saying it. Now you're doing a bit of stand-up.
Yeah. Turns out I am funny. Who knew? My team that I had, they always talk about these. I did all these impressions. My dad always did impressions and continues to do impressions. He does like 300 different voices. So I grew up around that. And yes, I'd always fancied doing something. And last year I had just a week of time. So I ended up doing full-time intensive stand-up course, fantastic, in London at a place called the Bill Murray Comedy Club with a fantastic teacher called Dec Munro, one of the best weeks of my life. Yeah, and I've been doing some stand-up gigs since then.
Brilliant to chat to you, Luciana Berger. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria.